Hello there, you awakening wonder. Thanks for joining me today for Stay Free with Russell Brand. It's a super special episode with Lily Phillips. In a way, it's a kind of clash of the titans of promiscuity. Me as a former denizen of that world of hedonism, Epicureanism, and mad lasciviousness, now redeemed, saved. Listen, before coming to Christ, I recognised that a life of monogamy was going to be advantageous, but it's a brilliant conversation that talks about the commodification of sex, the objectification of people, and how that actually happens beyond just sex. Looking at people in just economic terms would be another example of that. And we talk about Lily Phillips as a kind of entrepreneur and businesswoman. And if you extract the sanctity and sacredness from sex, which many people from across the political and cultural spectrum are attempting to do, then what's wrong with wandering the streets with effluvia on your face? It's an interesting question, and it's one of the questions that we discuss. We'll also be looking at my island, the United Kingdom, mine just as a man born there who loves the country, and what's happening there under the bizarre stewardship of Keir Starmer, duplicitous authoritarian and legislator, a man who seems determined to turn the United Kingdom into a nightmare penitentiary island. We'll be looking at that. If you're watching us anywhere other than on Rumble and Rumble Premium, that is our home. You might be watching this on YouTube, with whom we are involved in legal disputes, of course, because of their censorial nature. You might be watching it on X, which is heralded as somewhat of a vanguard when it comes to free speech, along with Rumble. Wherever you're watching it, please join us on Rumble Premium. And if you use the code BRAND, not only do you get ad-free content, not only do you get additional content from me, different interviews, weird, mad, bizarre experiences and ponderings, you also get extra content from Glenn Greenwald and Bongino and Crowder and many of Rumble's other premium content creators. Let's get into today's first story about Keir Starmer. The Lily Phillips interview will be coming up soon, so be sure to stay with us for that, because Lily Phillips is a woman who can handle a marathon. I'm a man who can handle a marathon. Can you go the distance with us? It's a pretty extraordinary conversation, I will tell you that. And with that, if you've not seen Break Bread yet, have a look at Break Bread with Russell Brand. We've got Paul Kingsnorth coming up, and available to Rumble Premium members are my conversations with the apologist and theologian Wes Huff, as well as my conversations with Tucker. Loads of fantastic content there. You may not have been able to visit a newborn baby or watch your grandmother die in hospital, but Keir Starmer, Prime Minister of the UK's larynx, why, that is an issue of international importance. Hello there, you awake and wonder. Thank you for joining me every day, Monday to Thursday, for a Rumble stream on Stay Free, where we talk about things that matter, like hypocrisy and deception, like globalist leaders who claim they care for you, breaking the rules that they endorse. During the pandemic, the Labour Party, that's our centre-left globalist party that runs the UK, weren't in power. And they derided and condemned Boris Johnson, centre-right politician, for breaking COVID rules. They had parties, they had fun, they had a gay old time of it there in Westminster and Downing Street, while you were locked in your home, serf, while you were told what to do, while you were taking medications that hadn't been trialled or tested in the manner that you were told they had been, while Pfizer and Moderna were making profits. Keir Starmer was getting his larynx interfered with, and Boris Johnson was partying like it were 1999 and not 2019, and that there never was a pandemic except for the tumbling purple rain of Prince himself. So what is this a story about? It's a story about hypocrisy and deception. It's a story about leaders like Gavin Newsom or Boris Johnson or Keir Starmer across the Atlantic, across the aisles, across political divides, believing that they're different from us, believing that they can set laws, vague laws, then they can decide who on a paddleboard might have to be dragged off and imprisoned in Gavin Newsom's California, not necessarily imprisoned, and who is able to just do what they want. This is all, of course, resurfacing and being discussed in light of the fact that Keir Starmer on Christmas Eve during the pandemic had his voice coach, Leonie Mellinger, a name that sounds like a kind of vocal exercise. Leonie Mellinger, Leonie Mellinger, Leonie Mellinger, over on Christmas Eve, while you couldn't watch, I don't know, elderly relatives die, or babies be born, or go to church, or do anything, because actually what was being advanced during that period, if you don't know yet, was the normalization of mass control, the normalization of mass medical programs. Those things were put before us, I would say, and normalized. And I would say that's something we have to be alert to this day, regardless of what political party is in government, because Keir Starmer, who made bold claims that he would resign if ever he was found to have breached COVID laws, guess what? Guess what? Breached COVID laws. How extraordinary that these people that are not willing to do inquiries into actual rape gangs break laws. How extraordinary that these people that have clandestine meetings with the CIA about Julian Assange, as some would say, don't act morally around issues like free speech or freedom more generally. Let's have a look at how this story broke in the UK about Keir Starmer, two-tier Keir Starmergeddon, having voice coaching during the pandemic. And you might think, oh, this is a while ago, but it's a litmus test for how they conduct themselves. We're always talking about moral authority and righteousness and ethics and how people behave now and how people behaved in the past. Well, here are people with actual power. And by power, I mean the ability to tax you and take your money and send it to a foreign country to perpetuate a war. By power, I mean the ability to ensure that people without trial can be incarcerated in Belmarsh. That's Julian Assange, of course. I'm talking about real economic and military power. So their morality matters. At least that's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat. Let's take a look at this Keir Starmer story about lawbreaker Keir and his larynx adjustments during a time of respiratory pandemic, apparent respiratory pandemic. Also, don't you always ask the question, what did they know that we didn't know? Because remember, the lockdown wasn't meant to be a punishment. They weren't locking you in your home to hurt you. Remember, they were doing it to protect you. So you're applying those protections to yourself and the people you love. No. Maybe we can't trust them when it comes to anything. If they knew, for example, that the coronavirus was not so serious that you shouldn't see people, they knew that then. They didn't tell you because it weren't convenient. Let's have a look at this story.
About another story, the Prime Minister was asked.
This is a British equivalent of one of those morning shows you have in America with a former Chancellor, I believe, Ed Balls, or at least Shadow Chancellor, who became secondarily famous when he went on one of those dancing shows that people go on and make you realise they were never serious about politics in the first place. Let's see what he says now as a media stooge about this subject. And I've not watched it yet, so maybe he gives a brilliant line of inquiry and analysis. Let's see.
The Prime Minister was asked about it last night. It's in a new book by Patrick Maguire, Gabriel Pogren, called Get In, and it concerns what happened.
Get in. That's what we've got to do. Get in. Once we get in, then we can govern fairly and justly and help people, which is what we're all about. Get in. So it's a new book about the tactics deployed by Labour to get in to office. Astonishing.
Concerns what happened at Christmas 2020 during the lockdown.
Also, get in is what you had to do. Get in your house. Also, get in is what those vaccines had to do into your arm. Get in. Get in line. Do as you're told. Don't ask any questions. And if you do ask questions, we got a policy for that as well.
Boris Johnson had announced that London and the South East had gone into full lockdown again. And that book reports that on Christmas Eve, the Prime Minister had a visit from his voice.
Christmas Eve visit? Who is he? Scrooge? On Christmas Eve, you will be visited by the ghost of Christmas present? No, a voice coach. No one likes that nasal droning voice you've got, Keir. It's annoying people.
Oh, no, it is annoying, isn't it?
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
His voice coach called Leonie Mellinger, and that...
Come in, Leonie Mellinger.
Oh, just don't talk. Not till we've done the session.
Please, sorry, Leonie. Please keep 6 feet away.
I'll give you more than 6 feet, you little weirdo.
Oh, sorry about that. Just help me with my voice.
She qualified, according to the book, for key worker status. At that time, we weren't allowed to meet families and friends in more than groups of 6, and people weren't going to work other than for key workers. When you look up the definition of key worker at the time, these were people delivering vital frontline services. Now, you as a health minister...
Quick! It's an emergency! What is it? Keir Starmer's voice is annoying. It's not like food. It's not like a St. Bernard rescuing someone in the snow on an alpine range. Help me, help me. What? Yes, what is it? My voice is a bit annoying. It's not like that guy that had to saw his arm off because it was trapped in a creek. Help me, help me. I need vocal support. My voice is a bit annoying. Keir Starmer's voice might be a bit annoying, but it's not an emergency, and helping it to be less annoying is not key work, particularly when what he says with his still annoying voice is mostly lies, incendiary rhetoric which prioritises the encroachment on free speech and the penalisation of free speech over, for example, inquiring into rape gangs. Don't look into that rape gang. No, what did you say? Don't do an inquiry into those rape gangs. I can't understand what you're saying. I said, don't post that on Facebook or you're looking at 5 years.
As a health minister, talking all the time to nurses, to care workers, key workers, if they are angry that at the time the Prime Minister's voice coach was treated as a key worker and say, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. What would you say to them?
Look, it was a terrible time for all of us, wasn't it? And we're starting to see again the sort of mudslinging that we saw before by some of the Conservatives.
Yeah, it's a terrible time, because of mudslinging. We all remember it was mostly the mudslinging. No, it wasn't mudslinging that was annoying. What it was a globalist coup that put people in their homes, shamed people if they wouldn't take medicine, controlled information and normalised the control and censorship of free speech online, that demonstrated integration of government agencies like the FBI, CIA and presumably British equivalents into social media sites that normalise the idea that the government should be in control of what you're able to discuss. People that had vaccine injuries were shamed and censored, and still to this day vaccine companies have indemnity, and any payouts that the vaccine injured, because they have been injured, receive will come from the same government, ultimately making us pay for this stuff like 2 or 3 times while encroaching continually on our freedoms. It weren't about mudslinging, it was about corruption.
Around that at this time when we know that there were actual real parties going on at this time.
Real parties, real parties is the problem. Real parties, voice coaches, it amounts to the same thing. You lot do this, we're going to do that because we're better than you and we understand reality better than you. How else could we make claims to be able to control your free speech or demand that you take medications or demand that you fund foreign wars or put you in jail for speaking openly or any of the thousands of everyday corruptions that flow out of centralised power? How could we legitimise it except unless we thought we were better than you and therefore exempted from rules that you serf class, have to obey? We couldn't do it. So what this story does is just exposes something that you all know to be true, that you've always known to be true. They think they're better than you. They think they should be able to control you. They say there is no God, so they can lay claim to the power that only that God can responsibly handle.
Going on at this time.
And I'm not a Conservative, and I'm just reporting what's in the book. I'm just asking, factually, is the Prime Minister's voice coach a key worker on Christmas Eve?
His voice is quite annoying. I mean, have you heard his voice? I make Britain a better place. Oh, yeah, no, it's kind of an emergency. It's kind of...
The return of the sausages.
Please, it's Christmas Eve, and we've got to do something about the sausages. I mean, hostages.
On Christmas Eve 2020, yes or no?
So my understanding of the Tier 4 at that time in London is that people were working, and that this was part of working for presentations that the now Prime Minister had to make.
Well, I actually think if you look up the definition of key worker at the time, it was those needed to run the justice system, religious staff, charities and workers delivering key frontline services, and in government, administrative occupations delivering effective delivery of the COVID-19 response. Now, is the Prime Minister's voice...
Actually, your voice is quite annoying. You should get a voice coach yourself. Now, listen, this is what I consider to be, like, maybe voice coaches maybe voice coaching is absolutely vital when these various conduits of propaganda and deception are conveying their duplicitous message.
Is the Prime Minister's voice coach vital to delivering a key frontline service or the effective delivery of the COVID-19 response? Because that is a key worker.
So my understanding is that at that time at Tier 4 in London, that people were at work for work-related reasons.
So not just key workers?
My understanding is that people are at work for work-related reasons.
So when the book says that...
How exhausting to be a contemporary politician and just have to hold aloft an umbrella of perpetual deception continually. My understanding is that it's keywords. I'm just exhausted. That's a person who presumably had goals and aims in life to get into government, to make a difference, to represent maybe the interests of women or the dispossessed. There could be countless various ways that a person might, with idealism, enter into politics. And what do you find yourself doing? Just reiterating some dumb, emphatic lump of language to protect the corrupt and ensure that varieties of corruption can continue as usual, whoever is in a position of power. Because while we're talking about that, what we're not talking about is, wait a minute, weren't we censoring people during that pandemic period for talking about their own actual vaccine injuries? Weren't we locking people in their homes? Doesn't this point to the fact that there is some kind of weird, ulterior global power that temporarily and inadvertently revealed itself during that COVID pandemic when governments across the world cooperated in merry tyranny, whether it was in Canada with the truckers, whether it was in Canada with the truckers, or in the UK with the lies, or Gavin Newsom with his parties, or the enormous corporations that made tremendous profits, or the revelation that Bill Gates is somehow involved in all of this and manufacturing vaccines and donating to the WHO, and that across the world there are systems of power that conceal themselves. And even this explanation that this politician is offering is part of the masquerade and facade that defines contemporary politics and power as the real forces maneuver behind it, ensuring that we remain controlled, unable to act with sovereignty and potency.
That it was okay because she was a key worker. You're saying it was okay because she was a worker, whether she's a key worker or not.
I can't comment on the book or where the journalists had that information from. I mean, that is a bit of a hypothetical for me at this point.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it's all hypothetical if there is no actual moral authority at the heart of leadership.
Possible.
Here is Keir Starmer, the man with the most flexible larynx in Westminster, saying that if he was ever found guilty of breaking COVID rules, he would resign.
But if the police decide to issue me with a fixed penalty notice, I would, of course, do the right thing and step down.
It was politically expedient to say that then, because Boris Johnson was found to have done wrong in having all those parties when he was the Prime Minister. One thing I would say is that Keir Starmer's voice during that sounded...
Ever since the first COVID lockdown, I've always followed the rules. In that time, the British people have made heart-wrenching sacrifices. People were left desperately...
He's so close to saying sausages again, isn't he? Keir Starmer famously said sausages when he meant hostages. That means that he can probably never be allowed in Middle Eastern peace negotiations again.
I will not leave here till I get every last sausage.
Just give him the sausages. Make sure they're halal. No, don't even do that.
The sausages.
desperately lonely. They were separated from family and friends. Tragically, many were unable to see dying loved ones.
Many were unable to have even the most rudimentary vocal coaching, and one man I know in Leicestershire was at least an octave too low when speaking to his greengrocer from 6 feet away through an unnecessary mask. 6 feet was unnecessary at all. La 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 la!
Dying loved ones. This was a collective sacrifice.
I was involved. I barely had any voice lessons. La 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 la!
Sacrifice. People were entitled to expect that politicians would follow the same rules as everyone else.
La 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 la!
Everyone else. When my mother-in-law passed away suddenly just before the lockdown,
I immediately went to a voice coach and said, can you please coach some sort of never-ending living spirit out of this woman? Can you raise her up from the dead? How good a voice coach Are you? Do you even know it's Christmas?
My wife and I were unable to provide her father with the support we wanted to afterwards because we followed the rules.
La 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 la.
Barely a day has passed where we haven't agonised over that decision. But we did it because we followed the rules.
So you better hope those rules are not being set by corrupt globalist interests, by unelected bodies like NATO or the WEF. I will do whatever my overlords demand I do. La 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 la!
Because we followed the rules. We all found the rules frustrating at times, and I'm no exception to that. I had to isolate 6 times during COVID.
I wish you'd fucking isolate now.
Pulling me away from my work and the things that I love.
I could barely put anyone in prison for free speech or condone any rape gangs at all for the entire time I was on lockdown. La 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 la!
But I did it because we followed the rules. The idea that I would then casually break those rules is wrong. And frankly, I don't believe those accusing me believe it themselves. They are just trying to feed cynicism, to get the public to believe all politicians are the same.
I mean, they are though, aren't they? And that does feed cynicism. My cynicism feels really nourished by that speech, by that grandiosity, by the poor delivery of the sentiment. They're just trying to be like gits. They're worms in Satan's bum.
I'm here to say that they're not. I believe in honour, integrity, and the principle that those who make the laws must follow them.
So people actually do know what you're supposed to do, it's just they don't do it. Huh.
And I believe that politicians who undermine that principle undermine trust in politics.
Here we go. He's getting somewhere. He's going to say something now that he's going to have to act on.
Trust in politics, undermine our democracy, and undermine Britain.
And should therefore...
I'm absolutely clear that no laws were broken. They were followed at all times. I simply had something to eat while working late in the evening.
I was simply snacking away on a voice coach. She tickling my larynx, I hers. I have an unusual shaped family. Hey, who's to judge the way I get my clothes or what donations are made and what I consider to be vital? All corruption can be understood in one man's piety and righteousness, in his confidence and certainty that it's his opponents that feed cynicism while he feeds hope. How must he reframe that speech made then, now that we know that he did break the rules? And wouldn't a person with the integrity that he lays claim to there absolutely resign right now? Or are we going to believe that a vocal coach is a key worker and that Keir Starmer's voice is like the harp of David playing mellifluous melodies of absolute truth into the heart of the governed? I find that a little difficult to believe, but maybe I just ain't got the right voice coach. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments and chat? Remember, we stream Monday to Friday every day, and if you get Rumble Premium, you get not only an ad-free experience, but access to Break Bread with fantastic guests like this.
What makes Jesus truly different is that you could actually remove a lot of these religious figures from the center of the religion, and the religion could function in some formal capacity, or at least it could have been done by someone else. It didn't have to be Gautama or Siddhartha. It didn't have to be Muhammad. You know, someone else could have come up with the philosophical systems that led to Buddhism. The God of Islam could have chosen another prophet other than Muhammad. And yet it has to be Jesus.
We can't make this content without the support of our partners. Here's a message from one now. 1775. Did you know that drinking 2 to 3 cups of coffee daily can reduce your risk of death by 29%? No! And halve your chances of heart complications? No! No! But what's the point if your coffee tastes like it was brewed by someone who thinks soy lattes are the pinnacle of human achievement? 1775 Coffee is here to reclaim coffee from the wokarati. Hand-picked Bolivian beans. Don't be disgusting. That is not a euphemism for, flicking your old. Roasted in the USA, delivering pure single-origin brilliance without a hint of deceit. Every dollar you spend enters you to win a blacked-out 2024 Tesla Cybertruck plus $30,000 of cash. Head to 7075. Yes, a Cybertruck, a modern-day Ark, ready to navigate the floods of uncertainty. Is this a metaphor? Was the Ark a metaphor? With the strength to carry you through any of life's trials. Head to 1775coffee.com, stock up, and fuel your mornings with rebellion. Use this code for 15% off. Don't miss your chance to drive off in a Cybertruck. Now, you've seen that the United Kingdom is in a place of disrepute and disrepair, perhaps because of bad globalist governors and leaders. Let me know in the comments and chat if you agree with that. Wherever you're watching us now, X, YouTube, or wherever, surely you have the appetite to see some authentic English voices talking about something that matters. And what matters more than sex? The power of creation and creativity itself, perhaps the act in which we are most like God, where there is a requirement for where there is a requirement to acknowledge, sanctity and beauty and love and truth. I haven't always lived like that, of course. I was a very promiscuous, hedonistic individual. That's why I was fascinated to talk to Lily Phillips. Lily Phillips is an OnlyFans model and cultural phenomenon undertaking online escapades that celebrate the orgiastic, having it off with like 35 guys one day, having sex with 100 men in an afternoon, reaching numerical records in a place that many people still consider to be sacred. But wow, I remember there was a time where I felt like I was being celebrated as a womanizer, celebrated for sleeping with hundreds and thousands of people. It's something that, for a number of reasons, some of which are pretty obvious, I've come to regard in a very, very different light. That's why I'm fascinated to speak with Lily Phillips, my fellow English person, my fellow person potentially caught in a whirlwind of the power of carnality. Lily Phillips, thanks so much for joining me on Stay Free with Russell Brand.
No, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Lily, I'm obviously fascinated to talk to you on this basis. I've been famous, I guess, for a long time. And so much of my fame has been connected to sex and sexuality. The books that I wrote, my autobiography, really cover, I think it begins with me in a sex addiction treatment center. When I was a famous person, I was famous for my promiscuity. I've acknowledged that in the past I paid for sex and openly admit that I've had addiction issues around sex. It's been further complicated by the fact that some pretty serious allegations in our country have been made against me, which are untrue. But I recognize that I created conditions through my misuse of sexual power, Like sex is I believe now, and this is what I want to talk to you about, that sex is sacred and extremely powerful. And that when I lived a life where I used sex like it was a kind of leisure activity and used my fame to access sex in ways that are spiritually difficult, because you have a kind of power when you're famous. You'll start to experience it now, I suppose, your own version of it. And when you have that power, it allows things to happen that are perhaps beyond certain moral boundaries, I would call it. So the reason I want to talk to you is because in a way, you're an example of so many modern phenomena. Internet fame, you didn't used to get people being famous because of Instagram, and it's even more niche to be famous from OnlyFans. And because what you've done is so sort of explicit and overt. And I wanted to talk to you human to human about the impact and power of sex. And I suppose let's start with, how did you get into being an OnlyFans model, and what's been your experience of how that's escalated?
Yeah, so I mean, growing up, I was always very, very sexual. I could tell amongst my friends, like I always loved sex a lot more than my friends. Even like when I was 12, 13, I was always so much more curious than my mates were. And then when it got to around, I was like 18 and I started to hear about this OnlyFans. For me, I thought it was like the perfect job because it you know, combines something I love, sex, with, you know, a job and like, you know, being able to monetize off that and being creative. And so when I went off to university, I yeah, I knew that what I went to university for wasn't quite what I wanted to do. I wasn't really sure why I went to university. I just kind of went because everyone else was. And then that's when I was like, you know, I'm going to start an OnlyFans. And at that time, this was like 4.5 years ago. So I didn't really know that it could do as well as it did. And I thought it might just be like a little side job while I'm at university. And then, yeah, as soon as I got on the platform, it kind of took off and I was able to kind of make good money and the job really wasn't taxing. And so I kind of thought it was perfect.
Okay, we're going to continue our conversation exclusively on Rumble now, so click the link in the description. I'm going to be talking to Lily more about the moral implications, the spiritual implications, and whether or not there are any boundaries to what she would do in the name of fulfilling and satiating her OnlyFans audience and whatever other drives are at the heart of this extraordinary phenomena. Click the link in the description. Remember, if you support us on Rumble Premium using the code BRAND, you get additional content, early access to interviews like this one, as well as Break Bread with Russell Brand with guests like this. So initially, you've said like that you find sex